In the shadows whisper your demons lurking in the glow. Ancient voices call our names through the fire and the flames. Demons are real, feel the fear, and whispers dancing your
Up in the sky, what do I see? A UFO is looking at me. Lights flashing all around, bass bumping from the ground. Aliens grooving to the beat, hip-hop rhythms got them on their feet. Strange beings shaking to the flow, spaceships rocking to the show. I see a UFO flying high in the night. Moving to the sound, everything's alright. Dancing the stars and neon light. Hop to the beat till the morning light. I see a UFO flying high in the night. Moving to the sound, everything's alright. Dancing in the stars under neon light. Hop to the beat till the morning light. I see a UFO flying high in the night. Moving to the sound, everything's alright. Dancing the stars and neon light. Hop to the beat till the morning light. I'm the god, I rise and shine. In this realm I'm divine. Like the world was just a sign. Feel the power, it's all mine. All mine. Thunder claps, the sky obeys. In my hands lightning plays. Mountains bow, the ocean sways. I command the night and day.
Good morning. Good, wonderful morning. Oh my God. So, we are here. What's going on with this? There we go. All right. Good morning. So, I am ecstatic that I can't believe it's been 2 years of doing this podcast. I know we had a little stint where we weren't around because of life and doing research and working and writing and 100 million things. Well, we did about 99 million things and we're back. We've been going on, this is episode 9 now. I mean, it's been 9 weeks and we had 1 week off, so that's 10 weeks. Can't even believe it. So today, I decided to do a little, just open chat. I says, I'm just going to go through and talk about everything. Just talk about whatever. I mean, I don't I don't always start off like this, I mean, because we know that I don't write a script. We know that I don't, I really, most of the time, don't even make a title until, like, the day before, or like whenever it pops into my head. Like, I'm like, oh, that's the title. That's what we're talking about. That's definitely what we're talking about. Like, that happened to me yesterday. I was sitting there, got some coffee, by the way. If y'all don't got any coffee, what are you doing? Take a sip of this coffee. I was driving to work. I was driving to the office, and I was sitting there, and I was listening to uh, this other guy, and he was saying something, and it gave me the idea of exactly what I wanted to talk about next time. So I was like, well, obviously we're not talking about it this week, but I know exactly what we're talking about next week. And it's really, it's funny how the universe aligns with you. People always say, "Oh, the universe is aligning with me," or everything's in my favor. Back in the day, they used to call it fortuna, where you were blessed by the gods, and so you had good fortune, good luck. It's the same thing now. Now we say good luck, you know, well wishes, wish you a good fortune, but it all goes back to those old days of the Greeks and the Romans where, they would wish you fortuna. And it would mean, that the gaze of the gods was upon you. It was that you were in luck with, you were in line with the gods and the universe, and everything was coming together for you. Well, I was thinking about, today we use that in spiritual terms. Like if you're a spiritualist, like somebody, and you read and you say something where, the universe is aligning in my favor. It's the same thing. But then we say that what you believe, or what you're thinking about or acting upon, eventually the universe will bring those things in front of you. Now, it's really an illusion of the mind. We all know this, because what you're really doing is you're taking steps to do those things. Like, say I have an idea and I want to do X, right? Well, in order to do X, you got to do step A, step B, step C. Well, as you do step A, it becomes easier and better for step B, and then step C, and it leads into step C. That leading into is an illusion, because I can't just, take out a piece of bread and all of a sudden a sandwich appears. I have to put the dressing on. I got to put the cold cuts on. Got to put the lettuce on, the onions, everything. There's the middle step, right? So the illusion is the frame of time that you're going through. Remember, time is an illusion. Time isn't real. It's our perceived order of events, and then that being in a straight line that our brain makes into an order. That is how we perceive time, because it's the total measurement of the beginning and the to the end of the event. But one thing happens, and then the next thing, and then the next thing, and then the next thing happens. It's not one thing happens and then I skip 30 steps and I'm there at the end. So, it's like a video game. You skip a few levels and you miss something, and you forgot the item you needed, and the creatures are too big for you to battle. You got to go back a few levels and redo what you didn't do because you're too weak right now. You can't fight the demons, you know. So all these things are the beginning of what we were talking about. The universe is a funny place. Remember, we're just talking today. There's no, I mean, I might go on tangents that I usually try not to go on because I'm doing the weave. You know, I didn't even realize I was listening to Smirkanish the other day, and it was so funny. He's sitting there telling a story about how he's at a dinner, and he's always saying, I'm doing the weave, I'm doing the weave at the beginning of like his explanation to the end. And also, how you like this new live sign on the live thing? I mean, I prefer it better over big words and whatever. Just a little sign, we're live. And but I was listening the other day, and I see I hear him talking, and he's like, I'm at a dinner with a friend, and they're talking about how Trump always does the weave. He talks about whatever, goes off on massively large tangents, and then all of a sudden brings it back home, and you're like, how the hell did he do that? I mean, it just, he's talking about shower heads and, whatever, and all of a sudden it's starting to make sense to me. And I'm wondering from beginning to end, how did that even happen? And he's like, I'm sitting there listening to him talk about Trump doing the weave, and I'm sitting there silent as a church mouse because I always do the weave, and I'm sitting there listening to myself by myself in the car, and I'm just like, I do the weave. I'm like the master of the weave, bro. Like, oh my god, bro. I talk for like 2 hours with no script, and I just fucking spew out a whole bunch of shit, and then somehow it makes sense in the end. I mean, oh my god, bro. That's so fucking Oh my god, take a sip of this coffee. I wish I had more. I wish I decided to just pour this out and make more coffee instead of keep drinking what I was drinking. Fuck. Um, oh my god, that was so funny. I was like sitting there laughing to myself for like half the drive. I think I had to like rewind like the episode a few times because I have no idea what he said after that. I still have no idea. I was just laughing so hard. Oh my god. Um, anyway, that was so funny. So I do the weave, bro. I'm doing the weave. You gotta pop and down, throw in a whole bunch of obscure things, and then bring it all home in the end. I mean, that was hilarious, bro. I'm like, oh my god, I do the fucking weave. Oh my god. Oh my god. Anyway, okay. Um, all right. Anyway, yeah. I can't believe it's been 2 years. I mean, we've talked about an obscure amount of topics, and next week's topic really kind of brings us back to season one, um, which is funny how the universe aligns, even though it's an illusion, because I just been thinking for the past like 4 or more weeks, basically the whole month of fucking April, that because we're in the beginning of May now, I've been thinking the whole time that I need to go back to the beginning topics, but not like rehash the old, like just continue on, you know, from what we were talking about. And because I don't need to rehash the old, you could just go press play and listen to it. Like, why? But it's so funny. You hear the old microphone, you hear the old podcast start song, which I am not continuing, And it's crazy. It's so funny. You hear like a whole different life, a whole different me. Um, I mean, it was 2 years ago, bro. I mean, I'm pretty much the same because I'm immortal. I mean, just ask Moses over there. I mean, but yeah, it's just it's crazy. But I've been thinking that we need to get back to the beginning and continue on with those sorts of topics. Not every time. We don't need to make it like a whole season or whatever. It's just we need to throw it in there into different things. The problem with that I was thinking about is I feel like I really hit hard with it in the beginning. Um, and then I have that return to the beginning episode at the beginning of the season where I talk about the whole setup. I'm like, remember this, and then I continue discussing on it. Like I mean, some of it's pretty self-explanatory topics. I talk about different wars and things. History. Um, those of you who don't know, I'm a mega history nerd. I freaking watch anything to do with history pretty much all the time, anytime, every time. Um, I mean, whatever. So, um, just ask Moses over there. I mean, he was, right there at the beginning. He was there. He's the guy. And so, anyway, um, I don't really want to rehash other people's conspiracy theories. I think we really hit hard with those topics, especially the ones where we had clips of different things going on and whatever. We don't need to do that again. That whole point was made. Going through the clips and debating it, all made. Those topics are made. There's no point in that. Of course, we have other different topics to talk about. Like, remember, we can never stop talking about dragons. I mean, actually, funny thing about that is I just see that on my screen over here. But we can never stop talking about dragons. But the funny thing about that is I was just watching last night this whole in fact I fell asleep during it, so I gotta like watch it and then fast forward again, or probably just watch the whole fucking thing again, because why not. And so I was watching this whole thing on prehistoric creatures, 600 million years ago and more, and they're talking about this giant freaking fish, man, that has zero extinct species. I mean, excuse me, has zero species that it's related to in the modern era. However, I was looking at their depiction of what they believe that this creature might have looked like. Damn, I wish I remembered the name. This thing was gigantic. It's an armored fish, and they're like basically like the most equivalent to our modern day is kind of like a shark, but they had these jaws that were basically like a trap door. Like they were so massive that they would open their mouth, and then this suction force would suck in any like creature, and the front of their they didn't even have teeth. It was just bone protruding from their mouth that they would use to mash these creatures, and then just swallow the rest of it. No chewing involved, whatever. But I'm looking at this thing, and it's got like a curved head. It's fully armored and plated. The whole back has like a plate on it and whatever. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, this thing looks like a freaking turtle. This thing is a giant, massive, 600 million year old turtle. I'm like, There is no way that you can tell me that they have absolutely zero relatives into the modern era, because it looks like a turtle. It's got the same thing, and then it has the mouth that kind of protrudes slightly like a beak, but is like curved inwards. And I'm like, some turtles have that shit. They bite that shit, and it's like every time they do that. You know, they're quick biters. A lot of turtles. Why couldn't it be the same sort of thing? You know, just because it's in the ocean, you know, doesn't mean it can't. And you know, 600 million years ago doesn't mean it has to be a shark, or a whale. It could be a turtle. You know, what if they got a little smaller and went on land? What if one of them got beached and was like, "Hey, I can still breathe out here"? You don't know. Then I was watching um, them talk about these insects and their exoskeletons, and how they breathe in oxygen through little tubulars in their extremities and through their skeleton, and filter it out that way. And I'm thinking into myself, I'm like, this is like some alien technology. Not that these creatures were created by aliens, but like that it resembles technology. You know, think about it as like, you know, it has an air intake and it flies. And it moves along through the air, and it has an air outtake. I mean, it literally sucks in oxygen and blows out whatever it blows out. Carbon dioxide, I guess, methane. You know, maybe their farts stink. I don't know. And he says, then he says that what happens is these tubulars grow inside their body, and then they grow disproportionately to the creature, to the insect. And so what they theorized is maybe that they're supposed to be larger. So then they put it to a test. They put in an intake and they added more oxygen to these insects in their environment. Insects grew larger. What happens is these tubulars go in their arms and extremities, and then they get caught in the joints as they continue to grow, and they bunch up. So they theorized that because we know that in the ancient times, in hundreds of millions of years ago, there was a lot more, even 65 million years ago, there was a lot more oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere. We know that back then there was about 30% oxygen in the atmosphere, whereas today it's about 20 something percent, whatever, and and then the other chemicals as well. And they theorized that the larger environment, the larger amount of oxygen in the environment allowed these creatures to grow larger. So they did experiments. They put these creatures in in an area all isolated and whatever. I don't know if it was a vacuum, but I'm sure they tried. And pumped in more oxygen into their thing. These creatures grew larger. They pumped in more oxygen. They grew even larger. I mean, so it was unbelievable that really these creatures are supposed to be large. I mean, they're only small because of the amount of oxygen that we have in the environment. Thank freaking the gods Because if you had to deal with foot long cockroaches, 5 foot mosquitoes, I mean, fuck that, bro. That is the worst thing I've ever heard in my life. I mean, those who know me know, I mean, listen, I don't care about like if I'm out in nature or whatever, but if there's a freaking bug in my house, I'm gonna like kill everything. It's like, it's terrible. I mean, it's like a declaration of war in my brain, and the, so it's really interesting because I was watching this whole thing go through these ancient millions of creatures, and then they were talking about how they discovered a creature that seems to be the beginning of herbivores. And it was crazy because they had this creature who was, they found a, it was like 70 million years was like the difference between this ancestor of the creature and the one that became the transition to the herbivores. What do they call it? No, I forget what they called it. I only saw this the first time, so this is like my first introduction into this. I have to do more research before I remember the names. Uh, they got like the typical, names that scientists give these creatures. A saurus, whatever, Denio, whatever, Ecclesiasticles. Nope, that's a Greek. And um, and he goes, so I was sitting there watching this. So you know how I theorized that maybe, you got to remember, I theorized that people, we know for a fact, okay, that when you say the word ancient, a person thinks about 700 to 1500 years in their brain, right? But we are always saying, I say ancient, and I'm talking like 5 to 50 million years. So it's not like, and then I say it's prehistoric. Ancient to me is like anything past like, 3000 BC. Basically anything that we start to create record of, which the beginning of our records is all recorded in religious text. There's rarely any other non-religious historic text in those times. In fact, many scholars theorize that it's our perception in the modern era of religion that we look into the past as these beliefs as religious beliefs. Now, of course, we know that the Greeks did worship the gods. We know that the Sumerians worshiped the gods, the Egyptians worshiped the gods, but it wasn't just about religion in the way that we think of worshiping our single God. Their worship of their gods was simply a part of their life. It was simply just something they did because the gods existed. Like you water your plants because the plants existed. You don't think about it as being an act of worshiping the plants. But what you're doing is you're watering the plants, you're taking care of them, you're nurturing them, you're doing something towards them. Today we think of prayer as an active thing in the world, but to them in the ancient times it was just part of what they did because the gods were a part of life and a part of the universe. There was no other thing besides the gods and their activities in life and the universe. It was life, So I hope I explained that well. I feel like I didn't. But, so we look at worship and other things in our modern era, and we look at the past from our modern perspective, but we have to look at the past and try and learn it from their perspective. For example, you would go to, let's say, some many ancient Roman sites, right? Like, let's say you could see, you could look at a bathhouse and a brothel, right? Let's do that. A lot of times, both of them have depictions of erotic scenes on the walls, on the ceilings, on whatever, and but you would say, oh, this place is, from our modern perspective, you would say, oh, it's full of debauchery and orgies and all these things and whatever. But they didn't think of it that way. They thought of it as a part of life, not the act of doing it in the place. They wouldn't do it in their bathhouse. It was like, to them, it was like a poster on the wall. You know how you have your poster for your favorite band or whatever on the wall? They would have these pictures, and it was like a joke to them. They would see these things and go, haha, somebody's, making fun of what we all do. We all do it, blah, blah, blah. Like, who cares, because it's nature. We all do it. So they had a very different perspective on those things. Today we look at it as, from religious context, from social context and whatever, but for them there was no social context for it. They thought it was hilarious. And whatever, maybe if I meet an ancient Roman again, they'll inform me on the joke, and then I'll remember it, and I'll fully get it, and I'll be able to explain it to you. I'll travel back in time, talk to some guy, and I gotta stir my coffee, and we'll get the joke. God damn, I make a good cup of coffee. I'm like that scene in Pulp Fiction where he's like, don't tell me how good the coffee is, Jules. Okay, I know how good the coffee is because I buy it. My wife goes to the store and she buys the shit. The shit. He gets so fucking, man. I definitely buy the good coffee. We'll start with that. Um, so, and oh, see, so we're doing the weave. We're doing the weave. So I bring in. I just remembered why I was talking about dragons, because in the modern era and the ancient times, because in the modern era, we think of ancient and we hear stories of these dragons and whatever. But what if it was just so fearful that we remember these stories from 40,000 years ago, or 50,000 years ago? Or what if the stories continued to pass on when we mated with other hominids who remembered these creatures? Maybe they didn't have wings at all. Maybe some of them did. There was flying dragons and not flying dragons, and maybe they were just the dinosaurs who were able to survive for millions more years. Because we know today, through the fossil record, through geological record, that not all dinosaurs went extinct 65 million years ago. Because the T-Rex and the raptor today have their direct ancestors are chickens. In fact, some scientists say that chickens and T-Rexes are 99% the same. Which is so interesting, because why are they large then and not the same now? Obviously, it must have been some sort of adaptations. We know that the meteor changed the atmosphere of the planet for millions of years. So, in fact, we're still feeling those effects. So, maybe it was just advantageous to not be so big. Maybe whatever. Who knows? I mean, it's really hard to piece together millions of years. But the point is that time is not as we perceive it. And we could be remembering things from our creatures because we know that, like I said, it could even be a memory of our stories that we heard from the ancient hominids that we interacted with and mated with before that they were no longer existing. So about 40,000 years ago. So we could have been, maybe the Neanderthals or the Denisovans, um, could have been seen these creatures and finally they died and whatever. Or maybe we, the idea of going on this quest or whatever is because humans or some creatures or whatever actually went and killed all these creatures, and that's why there's none of them left. Maybe they died out in the Ice Age, and we'll find some of their remnants in the Arctic or something. Who really knows? But the point is that we have remnants of these creatures existing for millions more years than after the thing. In fact, that they still exist today because T-Rexes are chickens. Therefore, every time you eat eggs or a slice of chicken, remember you are the apex predator and you are now eating a dinosaur. Congratulations. And so, but the perception of time is really what's different all across the world. Because we view, for example, some of these indigenous cultures, I mean, I wish that they had good record keeping because they say, oh, we have these stories and we've passed it down for 12,000 years. And you're like, oh, really? Where's your library of books? And they're like, no, it's all up here, I remember. And you're like, well, dude, you need like a strict record keeping so we can confirm facts and not just what's added by your imagination. And so I mean, it's all different, but you got to take it as you will. Going through all the different ancient hominids, I theorized also that perhaps even Bigfoot is an ancient hominid. For example, you have the story of um, the Enkidu and Gilgamesh, right? And this is a giant, wait, is it Gilgamesh? Wait, hold on. I just cracked. I just might have misspoke there. I thought it was Gil. Was it? What's his name? Uh, it's not Goliath. Um, Shit. God damn it. Anyway, the Enkidu was the creature who was sent by the gods to fight the giant, and instead they become friends and fight together, and eventually he presents the Enkidu to the gods as a creature, but he tells him not to drink from the gods, but and because they would poison him. But actually, what happens is they are so impressed with the Enkidu that they offer him the immortality, but because he knows not to drink from the gods, that he thinks it's poison. He doesn't believe them. so he doesn't drink it and doesn't become immortal. But the creature is described as a giant, hairy, ape-like creature, which is exactly how we describe Bigfoot today. And this creature in these texts was also described as being a relative of these creatures. So could it possibly be that this Enkidu was actually a Bigfoot, and could the Bigfoot really be an ancient hominid ancestor? It's possible, because we know today that there are still some missing traits in our, not traits, still some missing, classifications. What's the word I'm looking for? The person who, accurate description. They're trying to figure out this missing link in the genes, who these people were. Many ancient astronaut theorists theorize that it's, they theorize that it's aliens. But I say, but what if it's just that we haven't found another hominid yet? What if this hominid is the Enkidu, the Bigfoot? Is it possible that this creature is, one of our predecessors? Remember, if you read the story in ancient Sumerian of how Enki discovered the first hominids, is because he was out on a hunting expedition, and his hunters kept coming back and reporting that the traps were being intelligently dismembered and thwarted for the creatures they were trying to hunt. And, excuse me, oh my God. And so Enki went and investigated for himself, and he investigated for himself and says, well, I am going to look at this and figure it out. And he gets there, and he sees that he hears the same story from the hunters on the ground, right? So what they do is they stake out this trap, and they've laid a hunting trap, a pit or something or whatever, and what they do is they stake it out, they wait, and what happens is they see this intelligent or semi-intelligent creature who goes and is giant, 2 arms, 2 legs, makes all this noise, this cracking sound under its feet, sounds like branches breaking, and it goes and dismembers the trap without setting it off. And so Enki is blown away by this. He sees this and he says, oh my God, there's an intelligent creature on this planet. So later on, so they begin to do whatever, experiments, all things like that. And, they put, ways to protect the traps, hunters, all stuff like that. And eventually, there's a mutiny among the gods, a rebellion, because the gods are spoiled and they don't want to toil away in the deep mines of the earth anymore. So they rebel and they say, well, we want something. And the gods say, well, we could probably make some sort of robot creature or something. And Enki says, no, wait a minute. I'm a scientist. I've been studying these new life forms, and I believe that we can alter their genes and make some subservient creature to us that'll work away and do whatever. But what they didn't expect was the need for us to be worshiping them, the need for us to have that mommy daddy effect, that we want them to be our father, our creator, protect us, tell us what to do. You know, we don't want to think for ourselves, but they want us to think for ourselves. Enki does, at least according to the stories. And he says, wait a minute, I got this creature, let me turn him into a new creature, and supposedly that they give him the permission, and that's how he creates the first human beings. Which we know were different from today's human beings, but so could it be that, as Zachariah Sitchin theorized, that this story is actually a interpreted event among historical facts? Meaning that, is there truth in this tale that we just heard? And the truth is that there was a being, a hominid creature. There was an extraterrestrial being with godlike powers, which we know today is just technology. And there was a council of these extraterrestrials. And they all had a conversation, put into effect the funding for some science experiments, and created a new creature. Because they were working with genetics and whatever. And famished. Go make me some fucking lunch. The fuck up. I'm famished. Don't be asking questions you don't want to know the answer to. So anyway, we're doing the weave famished. You know, we're just going along. It's been 2 years of the show, so no, don't make me food. I don't want to make you food. It's all right. We're gonna have lunch after. No lunch for you. No soup for you. Well, bro, I'm gonna be having lunch. So anyway, we're doing the weave in this conversation today. We're talking from beginning to end, and we're just going. There's no set script. There's no set title. There's no set topic. You go make me lunch, and then I can give you lunch. Word? All right, cool, bro, because I was getting famished over here. All right, so one of the episodes I theorized is then, well, we have the council of things. And then I realized that in a lot of these religions, there's councils. You know, even in Christianity, there's a council. You know, there's the interesting story I like to talk about how, you know, in fact, there's more than one story about how, you know, God and Lucifer are sitting there talking together. Hey, yo, this is CC from the Pressure Boys. I think I have that as just an audio clip. Oh, yeah, here it is.
Hey yo, this is Cece from Pressure Boys, the best smoke on the East Coast, and you're watching the WARRmultiverse. Sheesh!
Tony Gabagool, it's nothing but fat and nitrates.
Hey, yo.
Over here.
So then, God is our demise? Nah, bro. Okay, maybe. So who are these overlord creatures? I mean, you have a council, and you even have sitting there with stories of Lucifer. You have stories of Hades and Zeus. You have stories of Quetzalcoatl and his council. You have Odin and his council of gods. You have Amaterasu in Japan and her council of gods. I mean, who are these councils? Because they're always talking about what we do on Earth, what we do on other planets, what we do with these creatures. If they're controlling everything, they are the overlords of our world. So, who are these overlords? What are they doing? Well, obviously, first of all, we know they're extraterrestrials. Because any creature that is not from this earth, including God Himself, if there is a real singular divine God, is an extraterrestrial. Because by definition, they're not from this earth. I mean, it's just the definition. So, not from this earth, you're an alien. So, and then if I'm from another planet, anything that's not from that planet is an alien from my perspective. So it's all the same thing. But these overlords, they control everything. Even today, they control the world, and you say, well, who are they? What are they doing? Well, they say that they control everything, but how is it possible that they control everything if we keep hearing stories of the gods saying, I'm going to leave and then I'll be back? They're like Arnold Schwarzenegger, they're coming back. And so all these stories of the gods, they say, we're leaving and we'll be back, but we don't tell you when. What does that mean? Maybe they're back now. Maybe we still got like another 5 years, maybe another 100 years. Maybe wherever they went, they got destroyed and now they're never coming back. Maybe they met an overlord faction greater than them and they got wiped out and now they're never coming back. And those beings didn't even know about us and still don't. So nobody's coming here to be our overlords anymore. What happened to them? I mean, you really don't know because the entire universe is a shot in the dark gamble. In one moment, you can have these beings out there creating life, and the next moment, they're all extinct because they encountered an extraterrestrial species who is completely warlike and wants to do nothing but fight. It's so interesting because I'm also listening to a fictional audio book, and it's actually the second book in the series. It's called The Tier, Tyr, and it's freaking awesome, bro. But it's all about how human beings, millions of years from now, is a spacefaring, conquering nation. And what they do is now it's almost like you imagine that instead of government going out there, it's corporations going out there, and what would happen? These corporations go and they exterminate lesser life forms on planets so that they can make new habitable planets for their clients on other worlds. And then they relocate those beings to what they call new colony planets. So the whole story right now is that these beings are basically equivalent to the 1950s or 60s of humanity, and we human beings are invading. We told them the truth. We told them we're aliens, we're not gods. And we told them that we're here to, fight them. And we want their land. And it's so funny because they react the same way we would react in the story. In fact, it's so interesting because what if it was the same here? What if it was the same thing here on Earth? The aliens came here, told us something, and we reacted in our own way. We either listened or didn't listen or whatever, And, I point to the 1950s when a whole squadron of UFOs, not once, but twice, flew directly over the White House. And then you have the general coming out there on live television going, we have received between 1 and 2,000 incredible reports of something not very, very incredible and not so incredible. And we've determined it's nothing. Don't worry about it. We're all good. Everybody's good. Like, bruh, we all witnessed, and everybody forgot. Everybody forgot all about it. It's 2025 now. We're still seeing UFOs in the corner of the sky. I see them all the friggin' time. I mean, I don't know about you, but it's freaking nuts. And you know, it's 2025. We're still seeing UFOs in the sky. They flew directly over the White House 70 years ago, and nothing happened. People always say, oh, well, you know, what's the equivalent of landing on the White House lawn? And then if the aliens came here, landed on the White House lawn and said, take me to your leader, okay, we would all believe. Okay, but them flying right over the White House isn't enough for you to believe? Having the entire city of Washington, D.C. witness it. And then the general coming out and said, we've received between one singular, and 2,000 reports. So basically you received 2,000 reports-ish. Like, it's all a big whole bunch of nonsense. I mean, there was definitely some sort of conspiracy. And, you know, there's still a conspiracy going on. Because, you know, it's what exactly Luis Elizondo said his reason for exiting the government was. And coming out and becoming a whistleblower and telling the truth. Was because he told his superior, who assigned him the task of doing these things, and says, hey, this is a real big problem for us and for national security. And the general, or I don't know his specific rank, could have been higher, admirals, whatever, I don't know, told him that he thought that these things were demons, and he took it basically in a whole Jesus religious Christianity concept, and was like, these are demons, we can't believe in demons, we must pray to God and whatever and all of that. And it's like, dude, so if they attack today, you're not going to arm the military. You're going to just get down on your knees and pray to Jesus. This is a problem. This is a massive problem for our military and for our reaction to extraterrestrial threats and for our advancement in technology. This is why we have not advanced our technology like we thought we would in the 50s and 60s all the way to today. Think of the Jetsons. The Jetsons was supposed to take place in the 1990s and early 2000s. And yet we don't have flying cars now. They thought we would all have flying cars and be flying through space and all this shit. We don't have any of that. And yet Wernher von Braun in the 1960s and 50s after World War II literally went on public television with the help of Disney and went on there and created a whole program and models and diagrams and posters and charts and went through his entire 10-year plan for creating a mobile space station with artificial gravity. And some people say, oh, well, we never just did that because it was too expensive or blah, blah, blah. We were focused on the war or whatever. How do you know we didn't do that? I mean, you know, how do you know that there isn't some breakaway black budget society? You don't know shit, bro. Like, you know, like you really know nothing. You didn't even know about half this shit until I told you. And then, you know, so these government, you know, they sit there and anyway, so the point is that he had these thoughts in the 50s and 60s to create artificial gravity, space stations, all these things. And in fact, the Nazis had similar ideas because it was Werner von Braun's technology that they were working with. He was their lead scientist all the way back in World War II. He invented the V-2 rocket. He invented rocketry basically almost himself. You know, not completely himself, but he basically modernized it into what we have, you know, today and back then. And so, you know, it's the point is that you want all this proof. The proof is out there. The proof is all over the world that we've been being visited for millions of years. It's in our religious encounters. It's in our you know, it's in our physical stone structures that are left. It's in our memories of the creatures and the world that we live in. It's in our mythology. It's in even in our historical accounts. You know, there's a woodcut from Germany in the 1500s of an extraterrestrial battle in the sky, which is so funny because if you think about it, from the time that the gods were last here, according to mythology, is about, you know, the 2000s BC. And when they left, and then would have came back around the 1500s, maybe 1300s, you know, so this woodcut could have been depicting the battle that wiped out the original overlords that were supposed to be here to come back and care for us. As Zachariah Sitchin, let's just roll with Zachariah Sitchin's theory for a second. Zachariah Sitchin theorized that these beings lived on a planet that existed within our solar system. And this planet would come closer to the Earth every 3,600-ish years. And then when it would get closer, they would be able to easily travel from their planet to our planet, you know, similar to us going to Mars or whatever, you know, like it's hard to do, but, you know, with advancements in technology, we'll definitely be able to get there no problem pretty quickly, pretty easily. So you see these things and you go, oh, you know, the gods, you know, could have been here. The gods could be in our solar system. And then if that were true, that they would go and come back only during the time of when they would come close, then that would make sense why they would continue to say, we'll leave and then we come back. And then they do leave and then they come back. It also makes sense why they always seem to try and input a watcher force in between their visits. Remember, this is the whole theory of the fallen angels and Lucifer and all of them. Remember, in the beginning of Christianity and Judaism and all of that, Lucifer was the first angel created by God. He was the most glorious, the most beautiful, the most radiant, the most wise. But he was also the most cunning. Well, some spiritualists theorize, well, if you were God and you wanted to split your consciousness, the first thing you would do is make an equal but opposite half of you. Hence Lucifer, the devil. If you wanted to make a version of yourself that was you but not the same as you and still subservient, you would make a slightly weaker yet almost equal version of yourself that was pretty much the opposite of you. Scientists would do this today, especially a mad scientist. So you have to theorize that maybe this is exactly what they're talking about. And Shooter McGavin, you still here? How you like my new live sign on the top left? You know, it looks nice, right? And it tells you that I'm live as a motherfucker. And so these watcher creatures. So it would make sense that you would have the gods, the leader, the king, the emperor of this extraterrestrial planet, say, okay, we did all this work on this other planet here, right? We created a colony faction. We created a mining faction. We created a new species. We have science experiments. We have labs all across the planet. We have things going on. And he says, we can't just go away and leave all this to whatever. We have to go and, at least leave something to guard them, to watch over them. Why don't we create a watcher force? So he picks some people from his army. He says, all right, you guys all go, and you, Lucifer, you're my most trusted version of me, so you lead them, right? And all these gods descend, and the place that they land is known today as the landing place of the Watchers on Mount Hermon. In fact, today there's a tablet carved in stone that says basically that this is where the Watchers landed. Right here. I mean, you have literal evidence right there of extraterrestrials landing here on Earth. And you have evidence that they are not gods, but an extraterrestrial force with military factions. Maybe their wings and whatever were just part of them. So, these beings came here and then they left. The main force left. They went back to the home planet. The home planet kept traveling through around the solar system, right? And in the meantime, Lucifer here is in charge. Okay, he does everything like normal. First, they're all chilling. Then, as the story goes, he finds out that a few of his guys have found some of the human females and that were created by the gods, and they got with them. Whether, by conscious, will, or did they do it the not so good way? Who knows? But the point is that he finds out that they're doing this, and at first, you hear in the stories, Lucifer discourages all of this. He says, no, you can't be doing this. But then they're like, dude, you got to try it. Pretty soon all of them start doing it, and then Lucifer himself does it. And you find out that Lucifer himself is going into this, and the gods, after their time period, the planet gets closer, and the gods come back. And the gods come back and they say, holy shit, what the hell have you done? And they say, well, this is our planet now. You've been gone for all this time. We've been here ruling, whatever. We made these creatures subservient to us, and we're going to fight. And the old gods say, well, you can't do this. We got to go. And they say, no, we're going to fight you now because we're going to rebel. And the old gods come in and they fight them. And this story could be what's recorded in Greek as the Titanomachy. The new gods, the Zeus and Lucifer and all their followers are fighting the Titans. They fight against their father, Kronos, also known as Odin, also known as, oh no, wait, what's Odin's father's name? Odin had a father. What was his father's name? Anyway, it wasn't Odin. Odin is loose. You gotta, God. Matching up the gods with the other gods is very difficult. Anyway, he says, so they fight and they win. The rebellion wins, and for the next thousands of years, the OG gods go off back to the home planet, and Zeus, Enki, whatever you want to call him, Lucifer, rules over this planet for millions of more years. And then finally, the gods redevelop their military, the old gods, the Titans, redevelop their military, retake over, and beat Lucifer and his forces. This is recorded in the Bible, and it's also recorded in ancient Greece. We see it as the battle of the Titanomachy is one and done, and then Zeus won and became the supreme god. But we forget that they had another battle. In fact, that they continued to fight, probably even still fight. There might still be factions of them. And he says, we need to, which he am I talking about? The old gods. The old gods say, all right, now that we've won, regained control, we need to reestablish order on this planet. This is not how we wanted our genetic experiments to go. This is not how we wanted life on this planet to go. Hey, yo, Pops, slap a Wookie. Good morning. This is not how we wanted life to go. And we wanted life to go a whole different direction. So what do? They say, we're going to wipe it out. How do we do this? We're going to send the flood. Well, maybe they didn't do things right away. You got to remember this, that their time frame is different than our time frame. They're not from this planet. They're from another planet, right? So their sense of gravity, their planet's mass, its rotation, its revolution around the sun, all very different. And they come in and they say, we need to do something different. So they create this whole thing. And if you read in the Bible, Lucifer, while his followers, this is why Jews don't believe in hell as a place where human beings go. It's because hell is a place for Lucifer's followers during the war against God. So only Lucifer's followers go there. For the ones who were in that war, they went there and that's where they go. We people don't go there. So, but then it says that Lucifer did not go there. It's funny how we in Christianity view Lucifer as being the ruler of hell when the Bible states that he wasn't sent there with his followers. In fact, it was stated that Lucifer was imprisoned in a cage on the earth for 1,000 years. Is that 1,000 of our years on earth or 1,000 of their years? and on their planet. And these beings, but so let's say it's 1,000 of our Earth years, right? It could have taken those beings whose time frame is different than ours 1,000 years to think about, which would leave enough time for Enki, aka Zeus, aka Lucifer, to escape, by way of just earning his freedom from his cage and have plenty of time to warn Noah or Gilgamesh or all those guys about the flood that was coming from the gods. Because it states in the Bible that after his 1,000-year imprisonment, his punishment was to walk on the earth for the rest of eternity, never reincarnating as anything but a creature of this planet. He could die like humans, live the human life, but then he would reincarnate and fully remember everything. He would live on the earth for all of his life. It literally states this. This is why it's so funny how different religions believe different things and how people interpret different beliefs in the same religion. And then if you read the book of Enoch, the Watchers even state to Enoch that it's possible for humans to get here, but the only way to do it is to shed your own blood and speak out that into the universe that you are a follower of Lucifer. That's the only way for you to get to hell, they say. So, seems to be some sort of vibrational, dimensional, activation for you to get there. In fact, Enoch himself is shown that hell is not within the earth, but a different dimension, a pocket dimension created by God to house these beings in torture and punishment for all eternity for their rebellion. So Enoch is told all these. I gotta take a sip of water, I'm dying. Enoch is told all these things. And Enoch is made to witness everything. He is meant to become the human scribe of the gods, according to the book of Enoch itself. And what's funny even is when Enoch is about to be taken away into the heavens by God, before he does, he knows he's going to go. He has time to go talk to his family. And he says to his son Methuselah, his son says, "Will I see you again, Father?" And Enoch says, "The guardians of the sky have told me that I will return to earth. But thousands of years will have passed. So we, my son, will not meet again." The hell is he talking about? Unless he's being taken back to the home world. And then when he comes back, however many thousands of years, when he comes back, he's all of a sudden going to realize that it's thousands of years later, because these beings' time frame is different. It could be he's going away for 5 years and he comes back and it's been 20,000 years. Who knows? So the creatures, you see how we're doing the weave? We started off with whatever, and I just been talking for an hour and a half, just whatever, about everything. these gods, they are these different sort of creatures. What's interesting is the thought of angels, because what happens is we get, it's like, where do the idea of angels with wings and glorious hymns and trumpets comes from? Because we know today that in a lot of religions, especially, it's an invention of almost the medieval era, because angels in the Bible and in other religious texts, most of them don't have wings. So what's interesting is especially when you hear the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, and the angels come down to Lot and his family, who's Abraham's nephew, by the way, and Lot sees them and immediately runs over to them and bows down and says, "My lords, how may I serve thee?" Well, that's so interesting, because how does he know that these beings are angels and the gods to be worshipped and not like regular beings? Because it's described that they have no wings. They're wearing elegant garb for sure, but so is a lot of people. They kind of look just like us. They got 2 arms, 2 legs. Could it be that they had some sort of other different marking? Maybe their skin, maybe their faces. Maybe it's like the ancient Greek depictions of their gods with horns. Maybe they had horns. Maybe he walked up to them and it was a human being, but with horns, and he walked down and said, "My lord," because he saw the horns and knew that they were gods, extraterrestrials, whatever. Maybe that's exactly what it is. Because how else did he know? He knew instinctively that these beings were some sort of crazy extraterrestrials? Come on, he didn't know shit. And so these beings, obviously, there was something that gave away to them that they were extraterrestrials. They didn't have wings, but they were described as radiant, glowing, bright. Same thing with a lot of the angels. Well, I theorized one time that what if what they're witnessing, this glowing, this brightness, these wings, might actually all be misunderstood technology. Ancient alien theorists look at this and say, well, angels are most of the time described as vertically or on a slow angle descending and ascending, which is similar to modern day jetpacks. It's not really the same as a plane or whatever. It's kind of like a jetpack where you have a vertical ascent and descent. Well, okay, but what if it was a similar to that but a different technology? What if it was some sort of energy that they were able to, create some sort of force field around them? And the glowing was an after effect of the force field. Let's say like, they knew that they were coming to this planet and might bring us diseases, or they might catch diseases from us. So they have this, glowing radiance on them that's like a force field, and the force field, maybe they could make it be whatever they want. Maybe they could make them appear larger than they are. Maybe they could make them have wings. Maybe they could do a lot of things. In fact, some of the Russian scientists, which I noticed, cosmonauts, I mean, which I noted multiple times as weird that American astronauts have not seen this, but Russian cosmonauts have reported that there are they've encountered actually multiple times these giant 10, 20-foot tall humanoid creatures that are made of basically glowing energy and have giant wings on them surrounding their spacecraft. That's interesting. Okay, to start with, very fantastical but interesting. Also interesting is why American astronauts have not seen this, or at least not reported it. And the thing is these creatures could very well just be using technology. What if they had an energy that was able to, create some sort of force field, and they were able to use the technology to manipulate the force field, and maybe they create wings, and now they're able to give the appearance that they're flying through the sky. Maybe this is why some of the creatures were seen as the gods were seen as glowing birds or giant birds. Or creatures coming out of birds, morphing from a bird to a human being. We have many of these depictions. Look in India at the Garuda, and the Garuda was a giant bird who would eat these giant snakes, the Naga. I mean, so it could be just misunderstood technology. Now, ancient astronaut theorists believe that, the Garuda was really just a plane, and the Naga that it was eating was actually just a gasoline tube or a fuel tube that was going into it and maybe in the front of it, and it looked like it was, eating a worm through its beak or whatever. I don't know. I think it's plausible to say that, but I mean, it could be true, but it's also kind of far-fetched that you would look at that and it would spawn a religion out of it. I mean, I don't know. Then again, look at the cargo cults from World War II. We landed in these indigenous populations on these indigenous islands, created runways for our military to have strategic landing and takeoff points in these areas that have almost never, if not definitely never, encountered other humanoid life on the entire planet. And we go and we landed there, gave them food. Cans of whatever, different types of food that the military had. And they thought it was great. Then World War II was over and we all left. And these people said, well, wait a minute. Where are you going? Where are give us your food. It was great. So then they started building these mock wooden airplanes on the leftovers of the runway. They have fire dances and chants that have been developed. And, World War II wasn't even 100 years ago yet. I mean, so it's really not that far-fetched then to think that over thousands of years we've developed a religion off of alien intervention. It's really not that far-fetched at all because we've done it off of our own human intervention. Even the Aztec gods, when they first came here, when the Spaniards first came here, the Aztecs first let them in because their gods were tall white people with beards. And human beings from Europe kind of looked the same. And their beliefs were that the gods would not come from the sky, but from the sea. So when the Spaniards came here and came on big ships and were tall white people with beards, well, they said this is the answers to our beliefs. This is the reckoning day that we all spoke of. We all said that the gods would return by sea, and they returned by sea. Unbelievable. It's crazy. So, but then that begs the question of, who were these gods who came to you from the sea and told you that they would return by the sea in the first place? Were they not even gods? Could they have been other hominid creatures from planet Earth that were traveling tens of thousands of years ago, or just a few thousand years ago? Some people theorized that the Sumerians and the Anunnaki survived and continued on and traveled throughout the world. Some people theorized that for example, they have the tradition in Australia that the Egyptians came and visited them. And in fact, they did, because there are Proto-Egyptian hieroglyphs carved into stone all through Australia and in many of the native cultural areas of Australia. So it's absolutely entirely plausible that the Egyptians came there, and maybe the other travels came. This is why our history and our idea of the ancient past is so narrowly limited. Remember, the biggest ships in the world before aircraft carriers were these gigantic, massive floating cities that were created by the Chinese. And before they went totally isolationist, and they were massive, giant battleships, cruise ships, storage ships. They were like 30 times the size of the Santa Maria. So massive ship. And they destroyed all of them, destroyed their, architectural plans, and isolated their country away. So we have no record of this ship anymore. So whatever happened to them? But the point is that just because it's ancient doesn't mean that they didn't have the technology to do things. Of course they did. They made amazing advancements in technology. Look at ancient Rome. Of course, we know we had slave labor and stuff back then, but they still had the same amount of workers that we would have, if we were to do a project, if we had a project that required 5,000 workers and everything. Yo, Toker, appreciate you with the follow. And welcome to war, that's right. And, the beings who, now I lost my place. The beings, come in and, Chief, what's good, man? We're chilling here. It's been 2 years of the podcast, and we're talking about I'm actually just talking. That's really what I'm doing. I'm just going off on a talk. No, don't worry about it. That's why we do it live, so you could interrupt. I'm talking about different things we've talked about over the past 2 years, and I'm really just talking, going on and on and on until the show's over in 25 minutes ish. So we've touched on a lot of topics today. Filler time, that's cool. I've literally just been going through so many different all of our topics this whole time. And if you don't know, Toker, but I don't write a script for the show ever. So me not doing a script today is no different, but not having a specific topic is what's different. We're kind of I'm just talking, basically, is what I'm doing. And, I think I titled this episode Caesar Speaks. whatever. So I'm just speaking, but we've talked about so many different things over the times. I'm doing the weave, Toker. I'm doing the weave. I'm starting off on our talk, and then we're weaving around, and we're gonna bring it all back home in the end. And um, so these beings all around the world, um, where was I looking at on my screen over here? Because I wanted to talk about this next thing. Uh, uh, oh yeah, we talked about. Oh yeah, I was just leaving it open on the dragons. That's what I was doing. We were talking about dragons in the beginning and how they're potentially related to our memory of the remnants of dinosaurs in, you know, 50,000 plus years ago. Um, so these what was I just talking about when you came in? The aliens and the beings and whatever. So all these different factions of the gods keep fighting amongst each other. You know, they but what's interesting is we know that you keep hearing about the old gods and the new gods fighting and taking over, fighting and taking over, fighting and taking over. But you also realize is that it's the same thing in Christianity, but what you realize is that they're actually all working together at the same time as fighting and taking over. You have, for example, we have our stories of Lucifer versus God, or Zeus versus his father Kronos, fighting amongst each other, but at the same time, you realize that all these beings, or even Zeus and Hades, you have all these stories of them fighting, and then a few stories later, they're sitting at a council chair together and having a conversation. If I could remember the guy's name, this is the worst part, Toker, about not writing a script is I got to remember everything off the top of my brain. Everything is crazy. Stupid family dynamics. Speaking of that, I was here's two family dynamics. I was just listening to Smirkanish yesterday, and he was talking with Admiral Stavridis of former U.S. Navy admiral, and he was saying, think about Europe, for example. The Kaiser of Germany was the nephew of the Queen of England, or the king or whatever, and they still went to war with each other in World War One and dozens of wars before that. The French and the British were all related too. Everybody was cousins of everybody. Even all the way into World War One, when the Russian Tsar actually ended, when Tsar Alexander was the last Tsar, and which spawned the Communist Revolution. His family was all a bunch of inbreds, and his wife Tsarina Alexandria was actually like his second cousin or something, So they're all a bunch of inbreds in Europe, and they all breed with each other and rule over each other. It's ridiculous, and yet they all still go to war with each other. But that's nothing new, because you look at ancient religions, for example. This is how the split between Judaism and Islam first happened, is because Abraham was about 100 years old, and his wife Sarah, whose original name was Sarai, was about 90 years old. And they both say, oh, I can't have any kids. They never had any kids, and God says to them, no, you're going to have a kid. Sarah will have a wife. And they say, okay, God, we believe in you. And 10 years, Sarah will have a child. And they say, we believe in you. 10 years later, Sarah's now 100, Abraham's 110. Sarah still has no kids. So he goes and marries. So his wife says, no, we must have a child. You must fulfill God's wish that you have an heir. So here is my very pretty servant girl. I think her name was like Hood or something. Bang her, have a kid with her. So she becomes elevated as the mistress to the thing, because back then they had more than one wives and whatever, but there was always the main wife. Well, Abraham originally came from the city of Ur in the country of Sumer, which we know today is the Sumerians, who believed in the Anunnaki, the alien gods who came here from our... Right, be fruitful and multiply. That's exactly right. But who came here from our, although that's a modern interpretation of the words, but basically the same, who came here from our world and says, you need to have your things. We need to follow along with the God and what God says. He said you needed to have an heir. He said your heirs would rule the world eventually. You would have pockets of people all throughout society, all throughout genes that were your descendants, he said. So you need to have a kid. So they go and they have a kid, and that kid is named Ishmael. And Ishmael is the firstborn, right? But the gods, but Abraham comes from the city of Ur. And they in the city of Ur have the same beliefs as the Anunnaki, where your heir, your true heir, was actually the product of you and your half-sister. So you had to have a child by your half-sister. They didn't have to be the firstborn. They just had to be the child of your half-sister. And then they became the heir. Which is interesting because we actually know that Sarah or Sarai was actually Abraham's half-sister. So so later on, when 10 years later, another 10 years, so 20 years goes by, and Sarai, finally has the child, and this is Isaac. Isaac becomes the heir, and Sarah becomes jealous of Hood and Ishmael, and Hood wants Ishmael to have a leading role in the thing. This is exactly the same story as the Anunnaki. Enki was the firstborn, but because Enlil was the firstborn of his father and his father's half-sister, Enlil was the heir to the throne. So therefore, when they revolted, when Enki, aka Zeus, aka Lucifer, rebelled against the gods, it's because he was the one he says, I'm supposed to be the ruler. I'm the firstborn. This is exactly reflected in Christianity and the beginning of creation and the beginning of Lucifer. Lucifer is the firstborn of all the angels. He's the first one created by God. And yet, it is Michael who is the one who becomes the heir, becomes the head, the lead God, the leader of all the angels underneath God, because he's probably the half-sister, the sword. It happened. It all happened. Everything happened. And so he's the half-sister of them. So Michael, it probably was the half-sister of whatever God that was, and he became the leader. And because he was the half-sister. So it's the same thing written in the Bible. And this is the division of Ishmael and Christianity. Can I have your soul war? You want to take my soul, bruh? I ain't got no soul, bruh. I'm an evil demon, bruh. I'm a god of war. Speaking of, if you heard the song at the beginning of the thing where I've been playing the AI generated song, Demons Are Real. It is a true fact that demons are real, but ghosts are not. Ghosts are an invention of modern technology and photography. See, back in the day when photography was first invented, you used to have to stand perfectly still and sit there for a while. And what would happen is people would move around. Or somebody would chuckle, just like we do today when you're taking a picture. Somebody chuckles, somebody elbows somebody, puts some bunny ears up, and makes a joke out of it, and people laugh. So imagine sitting there for 5, 10, even 2 minutes straight. Go sit there right now with a timer and see how long 2 minutes is and try and stand perfectly still. It's a long friggin' time to stand perfectly still. So imagine sitting there for 2 minutes and then you got to move around, and all of a sudden what happens is it creates a distortion in the picture, and it looks like there's a being behind you moving around. But demons are a totally different creature. Demons are real because in the sense of that they're extraterrestrials who are not from this earth, beings who are not from this earth, therefore by definition extraterrestrial, beings who are not from this earth and have a warlike and have a perceived evil-like aggressive and attitude towards them. Demons can be real because there's light and dark, there's good and evil, there's spirits or whatever, but there's also multiple different dimensions, different frames of light view, everything. Most would not be from the same verse dimension. No, and a demon is just man-made imagination. Now, demons are real, bro. I'm telling you, I've encountered them myself. I've banished about 12 demons. Demons are real, ghosts aren't real, but demons will use the concepts of ghosts to cower a human into believing their thing. So if you have for example, let's say like the stories of The Conjuring, how they're real stories and whatever based on true stories. Let's say it's real, right? And the person has, for example, the person in that story, they use exactly that concept. In The Conjuring, there's the old man sitting there in the chair and he's wheezing and whatever, and they think he's the ghost haunting the house, right? But he's not. There's a real demon there who's manipulating the ghost to make you think that this is the one haunting him, while really the demon's doing all the work and getting you. And the way you think of demons in terms of Christianity are not real, but the way you think of demons in the ancient term is real. For example, in Islamic culture, in the Arabian, in Arabic areas in the Middle East and whatever, they have the stories of the jinn, D-J-I-N-N, I think it's spelled, and the jinn is where we get our modern term for genies. Genies were basically these demonic creatures that would appear in a sort of ethereal form. Sometimes they would appear giant. Sometimes they would appear in a physical flesh form. What's the difference then between the angels and the genies? It's your perceived perception of them. It's your perceived perception of them that makes them evil, that makes them demonic, that makes them think. Just because I'm a creature with scales and sharp teeth and big bulbous red eyes doesn't mean that I'm evil. It just means that that's how I adapted on my planet to life, and that's what's going on. It's your perception of them that makes them a demon. I am playing a long game, playing the long act, watching humanity closely and gaining all this knowledge, waiting for my moment to strike and burn the world. Um, are you like Christianity's concept of Lucifer? Because I was just explaining like the whole episode how that Christianity's concept of Lucifer is basically just a whole bunch of bullshit. Um, anyway, we only got like 10 minutes left in the episode, so I'm going to keep wrapping up. This has been an absolute wonderful thing. In fact, we got 10 minutes left in the episode, so I want to talk about two things. One, I always talk about how just like every person's belief in God wouldn't be the big daddy appearing whatever needed or desired, everything from a world to all father in a sense, but the world needs to be reordered. That's true. That's why you see me and my forces out here working. See, what happens is, famished, is what you see out here going on in the world right now is actually being manipulated by my hand and of alternate version of me crossed over these alternate time frame to help me out, and we'll talk about that later. But he's the one pulling the strings right now. So anyway, because I'm God. So anyway, I always talk about how never assume anything. You never assume anything because the universe does not work like that. It's not a very linear thing. You could change the world just by speaking into it, into existence. You could change the world just by, doing anything. I mean, this is where we get the concept of free will in. Our actions create further actions and reactions in the universe. This is why you can't assume anything. You could statistically or think about what's most likely, but you can't assume anything because, it's not a guarantee. I always talk about how I can predict the future, but I've explained in previous episodes how I'm not actually predicting the future. Okay, what I'm really doing is creating the statistical probabilities of the likelihood of A, B, and C happening, right? And basically what you could do, and every statistician, economist knows this, historian knows this, basically what you could do is you could break everything down into pretty much three options of what's going to happen. And then out of those three options, pretty much one of them is the most likely. The more you think about it, the more you realize, you start to check off the dots and cross the T's and make grammar correction. And you realize that, that there's really always only one or two or three options for the universe to go based on said action. Remember, we're talking about based on said action. Oh, yeah. Demons coming out of the screen, bro. See, the reason why my face is in the burning bush image is because the burning bush is an ancient alien technology concept. It could have been that, he literally used some sort of technology and it resembled a bush that was on fire. And that's what Moses was talking about. This image on your screen is actually a misnomer. It may have been bright, but Moses describes the flame as being not hot at all. So it's totally different. It was weed. Who are you trying to fool? I sense they are coming for you. Oh, bro, no, they already came for me, bro. That's why I have all this back pain. Flicking his joint out into the desert and hitting a random bush by accident. That's true, bro. I was. But when you go, they came for you and that's why you have the back pain, phrasing. Oh, yeah, no. See, what happened is myself from the future wanted to guarantee that I learned how to become immortal. And so I'm scared of myself. I'm not even kidding when I say I seen things as a kid, bro. I've seen crazy things, bro. You're not alone, bro. I've literally just told you I banished multiple demons. Anyway, so what happened was an alternate version of me entered into our dimension and wanted to ensure that I became immortal so that to cause a certain number of effects. So what they did was is they break my back, which would lead into a certain number of things that I would do in the future, which would lead to me learning how to become immortal, and therefore I become an immortal god. You see how it works out, chat? You see? But the only way to do it is because think about it this way. If I never hurt my back, I would have been in the military. I would have been in the military, and I would have been in I would have been in the military. I could have died in a battle. I could have maybe rose through the ranks, but I never would have continued on in my religious studies and studying of mythologies and the world and things. I would have totally, 100% guaranteed, I would have totally embraced the military lifestyle, culture, and system, and just made that my life and career. 100% guaranteed, because I knew that that's what I wanted to do. I still would love to do that. That would be awesome, but then, it was very different. So what if I wanted to ensure that I didn't do that and instead chose the path of learning how to become immortal and do all these things and know the world and the universe? So what would I do? Well, I would have to break my back. And then I would have to sit there for a bunch of years and have every doctor on the earth, just like exactly what happened, tell me there's no freaking cure for me, there's nothing they could do, and all they could do is manage the pain, right? Well, so then it would lead me to studying other things: acupuncture, mythologies, magic, history, spiritualism, conscious thought, science, electricity, literally hundreds of things, all the way to lead me into that Buddhist temple 6.5 years ago when I discovered the truth of how to be immortal. That's what it was. That's how it worked out. Yo, all of you who ain't following me on X, what the fuck? For those of you who are following me on X, yo, I fucking love y'all. I appreciate y'all with the likes and the retweets sometimes and whatever. Today was an awesome episode. I'm really loving it. I wish we could continue talking, but I have so many things to do today, and so do you. And man, if you want to hear more, please go back to more episodes. There's so many, especially the older episodes were great too. But please go back and have a lot of fun. Great if you love these talks. You can listen to them on all podcasting platforms, plus I'm also on Audible and a whole bunch of things. So you could listen. I definitely enjoyed the ending conversation there too. I appreciate you with the follow, Toger. It was awesome. I hope everybody has a wonderful, fantastic day, fantastic rest of your week. Next week we will be back. We have, I mentioned in the beginning that we were doing the weave this whole episode. And I mentioned in the beginning that I wanted to weave back to the beginning, but not rehash what we were doing, just like we were doing today. I want to continue on with that frame of thought, but not the same exact topics. And then we're just going to throw in those different topics. We're not going to be, but it's all going to do the weave together. Each episode is doing the weave. We're weaving together the narrative of the truth of the universe, of the story of humanity and the earth on this planet. Thank you all so much for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful time. Today is fantastic. All of y'all are fantastic. Much love, y'all. Peace.
Midnight shadows whisper your demons that lead me.
Don't forget to check out our website. Much love, y'all. New updates are coming next year.
voices call